Hello and welcome to this Icarus presentation. My name is Katrina Dupuer and I work for the engineering consultancy Research Driven Solutions, who are based in Dublin, Ireland. The topic that we are looking into in this presentation is what can be done to ensure a resilient road in the future. Icarus is a CEDAR funded project with the primary objective of improving the uptake of climate change adaptation in the decision making processes of road authorities. In this project, we follow 6 stages towards implementation of climate change adaptation. Firstly, we look at where we are now. What is the current situation? How do we do things now? What could we do? So what are the adaptation options that we could implement? How do we decide what to do? How do we decide what to implement? How to implement it, the implementation strategy. And then finally, the monitoring and evaluation stage, where we look at what have we learned? Has this worked? Has this been beneficial? In this video, we will focus on what the potential adaptation options are, how to select the most appropriate ones for your organisation, and how to overcome barriers to their implementation. The main items that we are going to cover in this presentation are: I'm going to give an overview of the Adaptation Options Database. This is a database of adaptation options that has been prepared, where adaptation options have been characterized in terms of whether they're nature-based solutions or emerging technologies or other characteristics, and they have then been analysed in terms of their benefits and co-benefits. I will also provide some guidance on selecting the appropriate adaptation option, make recommendations on that selection process. And finally, I will review some barriers to implementation of climate change adaptation that you may have come across and propose some solutions that might help you overcome these barriers. We are all well aware of the effects of climate change, which is bringing more frequent extreme weather events. Much of Europe's infrastructure is aging and struggling to cope with increased populations, as well as the added pressures more extreme weather events bring. It is vitally important that we increase the resilience of the infrastructure that we have to climate change events in order to increase our infrastructure availability and reliability. So before I show you the Adaptation Options Database, which has been developed for the Icarus project, let me first explain what I mean by adaptation options. Adaptation options, or measures, are possible solutions to help reduce the impact of climate change on road infrastructure. So these are measures that you can implement to help your infrastructure deal with the increased number of extreme weather events that climate change brings. For the Icarus project, we have developed adaptation options by starting with those that were developed previously for the CEDAR funded Road Apt project and adapted them to apply to the climate impact drivers that were identified and developed for the Icarus project. We have also added additional adaptation options for climate impact drivers where previously none existed. In the table below, you can see all the climate impact drivers that were identified for the Icarus project. These are climate events which were proposed earlier in the project, and you can find more information on them in earlier training videos. They are grouped into extreme events such as extreme heat or cold, and slow onset processes and trends such as changes in mean air temperature or mean precipitation. Maybe take a moment here and pause the video if you like to familiarize yourself with them if you haven't already done. Next, we are going to take a look at the Adaptation Options Database. I'll show you how the adaptation options are characterized, and then I will show you how they are analyzed using a multi-criteria analysis. And finally, I will make recommendations on the selection of adaptation options. I am now going to talk you through the Adaptation Options Database itself. So this will be available on the Icarus website under Resources. So the first page or the first tab on the database is a README tab, which has some guidance and information on how the database was developed. And also there is some step-by-step guidance on using the database. It is important to take some time to read through this information and understand how the database works before diving into it. The next tab is the database itself, with all the adaptation options corresponding to the climate impact drivers identified previously. In the first column, we have the climate impact drivers, followed by the sub-drivers, and they're then categorized as to whether they're an extreme event or a slow onset process. The impact on infrastructure is then given, followed by an adaptation option to help increase resilience to climate change. Each of these options in column F are then characterized by their asset type, asset scale, what stage of the road project life cycle they are relevant to, what stage of the impact chain they are relevant to, the disaster risk management cycle stage, whether it's a short or long-term solution, and whether the climate impact driver is addressed or not. They are then further characterized as to whether they are a nature-based solution or not, and whether it is an emerging technology or not. There is some additional information in here in relation to nature-based solutions and emerging technologies. So where you have a nature-based solution, there are some references and some guidance on implementation. The final characteristics then are the stakeholders that are involved for each adaptation option. The next set of columns in the spreadsheet are the analysis columns, the multi-criteria analysis. So for each adaptation option, they have each been analysed with respect to their benefits and co-benefits, including availability, durability, impact on safety, impact on health, ecosystem services, water quality and climate, along with some other criteria such as maintainability, impact on reputation or politics, road user experience, flexibility and robustness for future adoption. Finally, there are some user inputs which include the costs, organisation experience, requirement for legislation, and any other criteria that the user wishes to add. These have been left blank for now so that each user can input their own costs and experience relevant to their organisation. Final column then is for any additional comments or information related to that adaptation option. It is important to note that the assessment scores provided in the analysis section are based on the author's own experience and are provided for guidance only. The user may update these if they so wish, as these may vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. The database may be filtered by any of the columns depending on the user's priorities. In the database, there are over 500 adaptation options, so you should use the filter options to narrow down your selection. Let's take a look at an example. So in this example, I'm going to select the heat and cold climate impact driver with the extreme heat subdriver. In this case, I want to find an adaptation option that I can apply to the entire network. And now we can see that the number of options available to me has narrowed down. We might then reduce this further by looking at costs, for example, or what stage of the impact chain or road project life cycle you are most interested in. Other benefits or co-benefits may also be of interest, and so you can also filter using those options. Further guidance on how to use a database may be found in Deliverable 2.3 on the dissemination section of the ICRIS website. I would like to dive into a little more detail on a couple of the characterization criteria that we just looked at in the database. The first of these is the nature-based solutions characterization. The definition for nature-based solutions that we have chosen to use in the ICRIS project is as follows. These are solutions that are inspired and supported by nature, which are cost-effective, simultaneously provide environmental, social, and economic benefits, and help to build resilience. And this is the definition that's used by the European Commission. Let's look at this definition in a little more detail then. Solutions that are inspired and supported by nature and help build resilience. So what do we mean by that? Well, there are nature-based solutions which leverage natural systems such as wetlands, forests, and green spaces, which have evolved to withstand environmental stressors. These can provide inherent resilience against climate impact like extreme weather events. We also want our nature-based solutions to be cost-effective, and often they can be more cost-effective than traditionally grey infrastructure solutions, particularly when assessed over the entire life cycle of the project. They can provide similar or even superior resilience outcomes while requiring less upfront investment and lower long-term maintenance costs. And finally, we want them to simultaneously provide environmental, social, and economic benefits. So what do we mean by all these benefits? So often nature-based solutions offer multiple co-benefits beyond climate resilience. For example, improved air and water quality, enhanced biodiversity, and recreational opportunities. They can also contribute to overall sustainability and community well-being. In terms of their reduced environmental impact, well, typically nature-based solutions have a smaller ecological footprint than traditional grey infrastructure solutions, and they can also contribute to ecosystem restoration and protection. Nature-based solutions can also help address social equity by providing green spaces, reducing heat islands in urban areas, and improving overall quality of life. Vulnerable communities often benefit disproportionately from these improvements. And finally, nature-based solution projects often involve local communities in planning and implementation, fostering a sense of ownership and stewardship. This community involvement can lead to more effective and sustainable climate resilience solutions. So here's an example of how we performed characterization in the Adaptation Option Database. In the database, you will see that we have characterized each adaptation option under nature-based solutions as yes, no, and potential. So here's an example of what we mean by that. So in this example, we are going to assess if each of these adaptation options shown here are nature-based solutions or not. So in the one on the left, our adaptation option is to cover the slope with vegetation. So this is clear that this would be a nature-based solution if you're using vegetation to cover a slope, and this is to help the impact of a landslide in cases of heavy rainfall. On the right hand side, our adaptation option is to support the slope with a retaining structure. And now typically this retaining structure might be a concrete structure, but in our comment section here you can see that we have an option to make a choice of design and make this into a nature-based solution by using terraces. So this option has potential to become a nature-based solution. So now that we've looked at nature-based solutions, the other adaptation option characterization we're going to look at is emerging technology. So what do we mean by emerging technologies? Well, these are technologies that represent innovative solutions aimed at addressing the challenges posed by climate change on transportation systems. These can include measures and tools such as drones and climate-resistant materials, as well as strategic data processing methods such as AI. These technologies can be utilized to enhance existing adaptation options or to collect information for planning the use of conventional methods in various environments. So here are some emerging technology solutions that can help with your climate change adaptation. So in the table, we have 4 different adaptation options here, which would be classified as emerging technologies. In the first one, the example is for cold milling, which is a technique to quickly remove patches of pavement for resurfacing. Real-time traffic information can help infrastructure managers monitor how climate impact drivers might be affecting road conditions or traffic conditions, and also how the infrastructure might be affected. Accurate construction records can help inform future maintenance or adaptation strategies. And real-time weather and traffic forecasts can help to reduce the impact on the infrastructure if motorists can be advised to take an alternative route or can help to plan maintenance. So finally, here is some guidance on how to select the most appropriate adaptation options for your infrastructure. The first step is to identify what climate impact drivers are appropriate for your asset. You can then review the available adaptation options corresponding to that climate impact driver. You can further filter by asset type, project stage, or risk management stage if appropriate and if you're interested in those. You might then have other priorities that you might want to filter by. Maybe these are benefits or co-benefits that correspond to your organization's strategy. You can assess if nature-based solutions or emerging technologies might be useful. And if barriers exist, we want to identify solutions which may benefit implementation. And the last part of this video is to look at some of the barriers to adaptation implementation. So through literature review and surveys of NRA members, the primary barriers to implementation of climate change adaptation were found to fall into three main categories. These were lack of resources, lack of information or data, and lack of buy-in or motivation from the NRA. And what was interesting to note as well from both the literature and the surveys with the NRA members was that these three categories were fairly consistent along through all the literature and through all the feedback from NRA members, regardless of maturity level of the NRA or regardless of geographic location. These primary categories were consistent throughout. So the first one was the lack of information. And when we talk about lack of information, this could be a lack of information on the climate impact drivers themselves and climate projections and scenarios, as well as lack of information on infrastructure, adaptation options, or even KPIs to monitor the benefits of adaptation. A lack of resources was the next barrier, and again, this consists of both financial as well as personnel with the expertise and time. And finally, it's an organizational barrier, such as a lack of incentives on which decision makers act. Talk about co-benefits, lack of corporate understanding, or organizational culture that does not support. Here we have a bit more detail on these three categories that I just mentioned in the last slide, along with some solutions that have been proposed by the ICRIS team to overcome these barriers. And so at this point, I'd like to invite you to pause the video for a moment or two and take some time to review the barriers and proposed solutions here. When you're ready to move on, just hit the play button again. And that's it. I'd really like to thank you for watching our video, and I hope it has helped you to understand climate change adaptation a little more and will help you to implement climate change adaptation within your organization. For more information, you can follow the link below or the QR code, and this will take you to our website. And if you go to the dissemination and resources section of the website, you will find all our deliverables there. Deliverables 2.3 and 3.2 are the ones that are most relevant to this video. So please take a look at the website where you can find lots more information.